Here's another illustration poking fun at the kind of Islamic traditional education, where the teacher is shirking his responsibilities, and instead of providing exercises, he's taking a nap and saying, the first child who catches 40 flies, I'll let him go home early. And again, using counterpoint of of the Russian schools or Armenian schools, let's say the Christian schools, where there's lots of children signed up at the library the first day of school, and the opposite at the beginning of course is at a Muslim school, where the librarian is falling asleep because of lack of activity. Here you have a father telling his son, there's no need to go to school today, I've got a meeting at home and I'll need your help. But of course he's going to gamble. So again, they're kind of poking fun at the lack of priority, of education as a priority. And here, here's a kind of problematic part of the publication, was that the publication was quite violently anti-Islam. And here you have a child asking for, dying, sort of very hungry, asking and pleading with his mom to feed him. And the mother says, your father injured himself during Ashura Tasua, which is the Muharram, and has been recovering for 10 days. And Allah will help, be patient. And I think everybody probably in this audience understands what the self-inflicting wounds of Ashura Tasua are. And here, kind of poking fun at the hypocrisy of a man who has just done his Hajj, 1 week after he gets back, sort of looking at a girl, and then a month later, going and asking for a sihe, a kind of temporary license so that he can go and have sex, but he can't handle it anymore. So, and the father pulling his child out of school, saying, over my dead body, will I let you go to a school financed by haram money of infidels. So a lot of the schools, of course, at the time were financed by Christians, sort of missionaries or convents. But even though it was pro-Western, it was quite anti-colonialist. Here you have the British with India in a plate as a fly, the French with Algeria, and Germany with Zanzibar. And what was interesting was the issue of censorship. Faz or Fas, Morocco in the middle is being kind of surrounded by Germany, which is the tiger on the right, England, the lion on the left. All of these animals are marked. France is the wolf, but the one animal which is not marked, if you'll notice, is the bear. And the reason why the bear is not marked is because it's pretty clear the bear is Russia. Everybody understood the bear is Russia, but to get past the censors of the Tsar, he couldn't actually make it so explicit. So the bear is never marked in any of the drawings. And I think animals are used almost as a kind of folk tradition as well, but often there's quite a large number of drawings and parodies of the situation in the Balkans during the Ottoman Empire where animals are used. Here he's poking fun at this kind of mix and matching fashion, which today people mix and match sort of haute couture and streetwear, but at the time it was not considered de rigueur to mix sort of Muslim traditional clothing with kind of European clothing. And here on the right you have an Azeri saying, brothers, I'm ready to sacrifice my life for you. What is our nation, what is the value of my life if our people are so poor and oppressed? But as soon as he gives his talk, he sort of says, see you later, guys, and goes off with a kind of a European woman. And I think it's a very similar dynamic to the sense of indignation that maybe black women feel when they see that a black man who's become successful sort of marries a white woman. There's a kind of similar sense of indignation at not having married a sister, if you will. And another quite controversial element of the publication was the issue of Armenia. As you know, Azerbaijan and Armenia for centuries have been at loggerheads and quite at odds with each other. And this illustration kind of pokes fun at the fact that they're actually not so different people, but they're being kind of turned against each other by the devil here. And of course, as soon as you take off their hats, they look almost identical. But the reason why the magazine looked at Armenia was actually quite pro-Armenian, definitely for an Azeri publication. And that was a very dangerous position for a publication and editor and the staff at the time. They would be attacked at several occasions, and they had to seek refuge in the Armenian neighborhood because it was just as controversial then as it is today. But the reason why it was pro-Armenia was not just to be controversial for its own sake, but because it saw in Armenia kind of a solidarity which was lacking in the Azeri population, an integration of European values, probably because it was closer in terms of it was a Christian values, an emphasis on education. But again, you know, if you take the example of Azeris speaking Russian to each other, an Azeri whose name is Fatima changed her own name to become Fatya, kind of Russianized it. Munavar becomes Varya, Ahund becomes Ahundav. Armenians didn't do that as much, and Armenians today speak Armenian to each other, and then as well, most of them spoke Armenian to each other, whereas, again, I guess there's a stronger sense of pride at the time, if not now. As an Iranian living Iranian American living in Moscow, I often get scolded by Azeris who tell me, how come you, our brother, our Shiite brother, how come you're not supporting us? You're always supporting Armenia. And of course, it's not a very complicated answer. The reason why is that in this Azerbaijan-Armenia, there's a conflict. There's a larger real politic behind it. Behind Azerbaijan is Turkey. Behind Armenia is Iran. Behind Iran is Russia, and behind Turkey is the U.S. So there's this kind of, if you will, an axis, which is Yerevan, Istanbul, Washington versus, and that axis is being complicated today, of course, by Istanbul, which is, I think, a good thing. But the Baku, as opposed to the Baku, Istanbul, Washington, as opposed to kind of Yerevan, Tehran, Moscow. And I just love this image of Putin kissing Ahmadinejad's leg. And the title is Love, Russian Style. Here's one of the situations of kind of during the drought in Karabakh and Zangezur, where there was lots of Kurds also living. The Azeris were having a leisurely Sunday lunch and just telling the poor and the hungry to bugger off and get out of here. And here you have the Muslim reading room in the foreground, nobody's reading, and the Armenian reading room is, of course, kind of burgeoning with activity. This posed certain issues with our own approach to publication. We had to self-censor, in a sense, more than they had to do even 100 years ago, which, of course, puts into context the issue of, we think that there's a kind of, in many countries, we think there's a sense of freedom of press, but then when there was no freedom of press, they were able to push the envelope more. We had to self-censor on certain issues that we didn't want to actually play into, let's say, our enemies' hands. Some of the drawings were a bit too anti-Islamic for our own taste, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But even some of the pro-Armenian, we did include, of course, many of the Armenian illustrations, but we couldn't include them all simply because the magazine wouldn't have been available. It would have been much less available as a publication, both in Azerbaijan, where it has a limited run. Here you have the difference between Azeri and Armenian philanthropy. In the beginning, the Azeri gives lots of money to everybody. In the middle, a little bit later, he gets a little bit less money, and then at the end, he's so pissed off, he sort of just throws the chair at the supplicant and says, "Forget it." And the opposite, of course, happens in the beginning in Armenia, where you have one person, a little bit more, and a little bit more. So it's a more sustainable sense of philanthropy. There's the illustration. This is one of our favorite illustrations. That's based right here in Istanbul, of course. And you have the dogs or Greece who are barking, and it asks, "Why are you barking?" And it says, "Because we want to frighten." This is the implosion of the Ottoman Empire. And it says, "And why are your tails wagging?" And the dogs answer, "Because we're frightened ourselves." So, here's the sense of the reforms, of poking fun at the reforms. The patient is saying, "Yesterday you tied me up in strong chains, causing me injury, but today you're rubbing oil into my wounds. This all seems rather suspicious to me." And another one, of course, where liberty, constitution, and justice are written on the banners that all have Persian tiaras. So this is in the wake of the Constitutional Revolution, and of course the Ottomans and Morocco and Egypt, basically the Ottoman Empire, are running away scared. And of course, I think the situation would be probably reversed today if you did this illustration, because as opposed to Iran being a beacon or a model for the Muslim world to follow, it's probably more likely that Turkey is, or we hope that Turkey is, I guess, more of a model than Iran is. The publication had a love-hate relationship with Iran in the sense that it poked fun at Iran in every sense, because it identified Iran as the source of all the kind of Shia fundamentalism that it was afraid of, but at the same time it was its largest readership. So it was kind of almost pitiless or merciless with Iran. Here you have Russia versus Iran. The Russian army sort of regimented, and the Iranian army doesn't need an enemy because it inflicts wounds on itself. Of course, during Ashura, Tasua, and during Muharram, some of the most fervent believers, they gash their own forehead with a sword. And here, of course, as an example, here you have Molla Nasreddin poking fun at sort of what we receive from Iran, meaning the veiled woman. And the Iranians even made formal complaints to during the Tsarist times and even during the Soviet Union, asking them to close down Molla Nasreddin. It was causing too much trouble. And at first, St. Petersburg was too far away to care. And then during, of course, when the Bolsheviks arrived, it wasn't in the interest of the Bolsheviks to make ideologically, even if it was a real politic, it wasn't in their interest ideologically to bow to the needs of monarchy in Iran that was in no way liberated, let's say. And here you have Muhammad Ali Shah, called Little Mo, who escapes to Odessa and to the Crimea after the Constitutional Russian Revolution, and he says, Iran couldn't appreciate me as the Russian women have. So he was kind of a philanderer there. And here, of course, you have the British inviting everybody to come down and eat and enjoy some pilav, some plov, some rice, and the Russian eating fervently while the Ottoman looks in the background. There was censorship. It happened occasionally, and of course they would just mark an X. But even at that time, the situation was kind of only getting worse in the sense that the magazine poked fun at the fact that 5 years ago the writer would scold the censor saying, you know, this is what I want to do and you guys basically listen to me or shut up. And 5 years later, there was a censor scolding the writer. Molla Nasreddin, the figure, has become, not the magazine, but the figure has become a kind of a retroactive mascot for us because he uses humor in a very first-degree sense. And we believe that it's only through humor, or the seductive power of humor, that you can critique, but also you can teach or you can inform people. Most people don't want a history lesson, and most people really don't care about what happens in Eurasia. Most people in the world don't really care. Eurasia sounds like some kind of planet, another in the galaxy to most people. If you talk about Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan or even Azerbaijan to most people in the West. So humor is a kind of way to seduce people into actually being interested at first. And secondly, the figure of Molla Nasreddin as a kind of anti-modernist is quite interesting. If you find this trope in many thinkers. I mean, Sartre talked about Baudelaire as being the true, as being a poet who was moving forward, but always with an eye on the rearview mirror. Benjamin uses this idea of the angel of history being propulsed into the future, but facing the past. And even in Malagasy, the Madagascar language, the language of Madagascar, the words used to describe the future are futures described as behind, and past is always described as in front, which is again a reversal of most Western languages, at least the languages that I know, where the past is always, the future is always described as in front of you, because we have a kind of positivist notion of time where we believe we know where we're going, and we think that the past, which is behind us, is relevant. And Molla Nasreddin is an interesting kind of model, a critic, because he's facing the past, but he's moving forward. That's it. Thank you.